So one of the questions I've gotten recently is, how does one pedal driving work and how does regenerative braking work as a part of that? And the one pedal driving is one of those really interesting things. It's actually kind of cool. And the first time I got in the car when I went for a test drive, it threw me for a loop. The guy's telling me, yeah, you're gonna just use the one pedal. When you take your foot off the accelerator, it's going to actually stop the car. And you kind of go, what? So the car does have two pedals. It has an accelerator and a brake, of course, because every car is required to by law. And the brake is primarily used for two purposes. One is emergency stopping, if you need to apply the brake to stop. And the other is to actually just put the car into a 0 mph mode, or to put it in hold so you don't have to hit the brake. That's it. It's only used for those two things. So primarily, if you're not going to use it for emergency braking, you're not going to use it. That's just the way it works. So the cool thing is, if you look at the pedals, you realize, okay, it looks just like a normal car, no problem. But when you start to drive it, it's a completely different experience. And that's what makes it kind of interesting. So in a traditional engine, in an internal combustion engine, you actually are using the energy of the engine, so you're creating internal combustion that then creates energy and creates that torque that moves you forward. It actually creates torque, it spins to the wheels and the wheels move. When you hit the brakes in the car will actually come to a stop because you're actually losing the energy from the engine disengages, but you're losing whatever energy it had. So two things are happening there when you hit the brakes. The first is that you're actually losing energy through friction, because the friction is actually stopping the brake. It's actually grabbing on to the tire and slowing it. And the other thing is that you're losing energy through heat dissipation, because it's hot when the metal touches the metal to stop the car. Now, they use all kinds of different things to try and help the heat distribution, but you're losing energy because of both of those things. In the Tesla and other electric cars, what you're doing is you're regenerative braking. And the way that works is, instead of actually touching the brakes, if you touch the brakes, it actually loses energy the same way you would in a traditional car. But when you decelerate, using the accelerator pedal and just taking your foot off of it, it's a different story. What's happening is that some amount of the energy is being recouped and brought back into the batteries to store for later. How does that work exactly? Let's take a look at that. As a simple example of how regenerative braking works, let's take a look at this very simple electric device. You turn the crank to actually create a little bit of electricity, and that lights the light. If we think about the way regenerative braking works, it's actually taking the energy that we're creating by our hand crank here, and it's putting that energy back into the battery, represented by the lights. So in the Tesla, the energy that's being retrieved from the deceleration is actually being put back in the batteries, much like the hand crank is cranking the light and turning the light on. It's the exact same principle. It's the same mechanical principle. It's the same electric principle. It's very cool. So in an internal combustion engine, the brakes are using friction, and that friction actually generates heat that stops the car. And as I mentioned before, all of that energy is lost. So the regenerative braking uses an electric vehicle's motor as a generator to convert much of the kinetic energy lost when decelerating back into stored energy in the battery. So the next time the car accelerates, it uses less of the energy previously stored in the regenerative braking, instead of tapping in further to its own reserves. If you think about it, the most efficient way to drive any vehicle, whether it's an electric or it's an internal combustion engine, would be to accelerate to a constant speed and then never touch the brakes again. Because braking always removes energy and requires you to input extra energy to get back up to speed. The two things you need to think about are efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is how well regenerative braking captures lost energy from braking. Effectiveness refers to how large of an impact regenerative braking really makes. So it's been said that the efficiency of regenerative braking is between 60 and 70%. There's about a 10 to 20% loss of energy being captured, and then the car loses 10 to 20% when it's converting it back and forth. There is always an energy loss, because you're always dealing with electrical components, heat, and other factors that will cause some amount of loss. But you're still getting 5% more just based on the fact that you're using regenerative braking. And that 5% can equate to about a 5% extension in your range of driving. And now let's take it for a drive so you can actually see how the regenerative braking works and get a feel for how it all comes together. You're going to sit in the center console and look at me. You can actually see my foot on the accelerator, and you can see the screen in front, so you can kind of get a sense of how it's all working and what's happening with it. All right, so we're going to ride along here and try one pedal acceleration. So when you drive with one pedal, it's a little different than driving a traditional car. And the reason is you're really only using the one pedal to get you going. So right now I've got my foot on the accelerator, and you probably can't see that in the video, but I'm going to try and explain it to you. So I'm slowing down, I'm at 0 miles an hour now, so I'm going to go ahead and tap the brake one time just to put it in hold. I tapped it once when I got to about 4 miles an hour, and then I tapped it again to put myself in hold. I'm not touching the brake at all now. I'm just sitting here. My foot is actually, you might be able to see that, off the brake and off the accelerator, and I'm just sitting here. So the deal with the one touch and one pedal is that you actually control your acceleration and deceleration in the car just by driving it. So as I go, I'm going to accelerate and decelerate just by using that one pedal. That would be the accelerator, which you normally think of as the gas pedal in a traditional car. So when you're driving along, you make that decision. I'm going to accelerate by pushing down on it, and I'm going to decelerate by just lifting off of it. One pedal control is really cool. It allows you to do some things without having to use the brake completely. So you can actually be driving along, not touch the brake really, and have the car respond to it. So we're going to do that as we drive along here a minute. I'm going to go ahead and touch the brake here, go into hold mode. So now I'm in hold, and I'm going to touch the accelerator again, and we're going to go. So we'll go through here like this. And as we go along, I'm going to take my foot off of the accelerator a second, and we're going to slow down. So we're slowing. That's positive. There we go. Okay. I'm going to hit the accelerator a little bit and get a little bit of acceleration going. And as I go along, the deal is I'm not really going to touch the brake. Unless I have to, I'm not going to touch the brake. I'll call out to you when I do anything. Can you see the speed on there? So I'm driving along. I'm doing a pretty good clip on this road. This is just city driving, normal city driving here. I'm going to drive along, and as I go, I'm going to be coming up to a traffic light here shortly. So as I get closer to the traffic light, I'm going to go ahead and take my foot off the accelerator in a moment. I'll tell you when I do that, and I'll start braking. So here I go. I'm taking my foot off the accelerator, and I'm definitely slowing down as I approach the traffic light. Now you can see that the brake lights come on here as well, which is really pretty cool. Now I'm still a ways back. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of acceleration. I probably took my foot off the accelerator a little quick there, but I actually was able to slow up pretty quickly. And now by just continuing to do this, my car will continue to brake, and I'll continue coasting up toward the intersection motion. And if you think about driving in an old style stick, the way you would downshift using the engine is a similar sort of metaphor. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar in a sense that you're using the engine to brake you in some way. But here I only have to do the accelerator. I only have the one pedal I'm dealing with. So right now I've just got my foot lightly on the accelerator, and I'm going around 40 miles an hour. So I'm going to go along, and you can see the speed limit here is also 40 miles an hour. So I'm doing the speed limit. But as I go along here, I'm going to just continue to drive, and as conditions change and things happen, I'll be taking my foot on and off the accelerator to slow down and speed up. Now, it's a subtle exchange you do sometimes, like you do in any car when you're keeping your acceleration going. You want to give it a little bit of gas or a little bit of power every once in a while in any car. So I'm going to give it a little bit here and there, and I'm going to back off a little bit here and there just to keep the speed constant. Now I'm about to come up to a traffic circle, and when I come to this traffic circle, what I'll do, my maneuver is to go ahead and release the accelerator slightly so I slow down and can look into the traffic circle. If there's no traffic coming, I'll go ahead and hit the accelerator again. If not, I'll continue to let it decelerate and come to a stop and wait for the traffic to clear. So I'm going to come up to the traffic circle here. I'm looking ahead. I don't see much traffic in the traffic circle. There's a couple cars there. So I will go ahead and slow down here. I'll take my foot off the accelerator. And you can see again, the brake lights came on as I was decelerating. But I never touched the brakes, and I still haven't. I'm still sitting at this intersection here. So I'm waiting to go in the traffic circle. There's a car right in front of me. So I tapped my brakes slightly so I would go down to 0 or close to it. And now I'm going to go accelerate a little bit. And there we go. I'm out of the traffic circle. And I'm going to go up to this intersection. There's a left turn I'm going to make at this intersection. So I'm going to go ahead and signal for it. I'm going to take my foot off the accelerator for a moment there. I'm not going to touch the brake. Slowing some more. And now I'm going to give it a little acceleration as I go through the turn. Boom. Done. Pretty cool, right? It's a nice slick maneuver you can do to be able to get through there. Now I'm at another traffic light here. So I'm going to tap my brakes lightly because the traffic is stopped. There we go. I didn't have to actually put it in hold mode. I just slowed up a little bit, and we'll move on. Now, isn't that cool? I'm going to put a link to another video down below in the description. And that video actually shows how this car actually looks when you take off the chassis, so you can actually see where the motor is and how that all fits together. Because it's actually kind of interesting when you look at it and see how it works. See, this car works on what's called a magnetic motor. And the magnetic motor just spins around. It allows it a lot more freedom and flexibility, and allows for the regenerative braking to have more of an effect than the other engines in the older model Teslas. The Model 3 was the first one that had this type of engine.